From the European Parliament in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thanks for joining us, and this is what we have on the program. Election threat, Boris Johnson's Brexit ultimatum, smart strategy or dangerous gamble? Brexit disaster. The EU considers declaring the UK's departure a natural catastrophe. Unlikely friends, a fragile coalition could shatter tonight between political rivals in Italy. Tricolour clash, what's really behind mandatory French flags in the classroom? And hot mess, all the best raw moments you may have missed while on summer holiday. All right, so welcome to a brand new season of Raw Politics, our second one, fresh from the summer break, and we are ready to go, so we hope you are as well. Let's welcome today's panelists. We have, of course, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor here at Euronews. So, Darren, obviously Brexit is a big story today, but which part of it are you watching closely?
Not quite as tanned as Philip
no.
on my right here, who's looking very tanned. But we are back fresh from our summer break, but straight back into Brexit, which you can't seem to get away from. Interesting, I think, on the Boris strategy. It did seem that he had all the cards up until maybe the last 24 hours or so, Parliament grappling around, trying to find a way out. But could we end up with MPs voting to block no deal and also block an election? Could this all backfire in Boris's face?
Options on the table. All right, our next panelist, we have Philippe Lamberts. He's a Belgian MEP and co-president of the Greens EFA group. What about you, Philippe? Which part of Brexit are you most interested in?
Well, getting bored by this unending show. So, on the one hand, you would like to get this over and done with, but on the other hand, I still want to retain my 11 British MEPs in my group. So if a way can be found to save the United Kingdom membership from loonies like Boris Johnson, I would go for it.
Well, let's see if that's wishful thinking. All right, we also have Geoffrey Van Orden. He's a British MEP from the European Conservatives and Reformists group. What about you?
Well, I'm afraid that Brexit's capturing my attention as well at the moment. Of course, we all want a deal. We want a good deal. Boris wants a good deal as well. That's exactly what he wants. We're being prevented from this. We're sending the wrong messages from Parliament to negotiators here in Brussels who seem to be boneheadedly stuck and not seeing the realities.
Okay, we'll talk about who's actually seeing the best part of the picture here. All right, so let's begin with Brexit this evening, because he vowed to take the UK out of the EU, do or die, deal or no deal, calling on the Queen and suspending Parliament to do it. And now Boris Johnson is vowing a general election if MPs try to stand in his way. With October 31st fast approaching, a vote tonight could be the MPs' last chance to turn the tables in their favor as they try to wrestle control of Brexit from a government they say is anti-democratic. Now, it's a race against time in unprecedented circumstances, and one which could land Great Britain in a constitutional crisis. Obviously, so much going on over there in London. So let's go to where it's all happening. Our correspondent Vincent McAviney is in Westminster for us. So Vincent, okay, let's break this down. Talk us through tonight's vote, what we're likely to see tonight as well as in the coming days.
Well, Tessa, MPs are back after that long summer break and we've got a new season, but it is still the same problems facing the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, because it seems as though the so-called Rebel Alliance, a group of around 15 to 20 Conservative MPs being led by Philip Hammond, the former Chancellor, have managed to get the numbers in place so that the opposition later on tonight will be able to vote through a piece of emergency legislation in the Commons which would stop the UK leaving on October 31st without a deal. Now, yesterday, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, was so worried about this that he decided to come outside of number 10 Downing Street and gave this statement.
I don't think they will. I hope that they won't. But if they do, they will plainly chop the legs out from under the UK position and make any further negotiation absolutely impossible. And so I say, to show our friends in Brussels that we are united in our purpose, MPs should vote with the government against Corbyn's pointless delay.
Now, Boris Johnson has tried to threaten those MPs on his own benches, saying that they will face having the whip withdrawn, essentially being fired. That is the ultimate move a Prime Minister can make. They've also said that they won't maybe honour the law if it is passed. That was said by Michael Gove over the weekend. Many people criticising that, saying it's a step towards being a dictatorship. You also have Philip Hammond saying if this wasn't done when Theresa May was in office, saying that there's rank hypocrisy now. But there are some willing to put their careers on the line to stop no deal. That vote will take place later on tonight, and then we could see the Prime Minister after that calling a general election. But then that vote itself might not get through Parliament because it needs a 2/3 majority, and MPs want to make sure that the Prime Minister won't use having that election as a way of trying to stop this law getting through. And I spoke a little while ago to James Johnson, no relation to the current Prime Minister, but an advisor to Theresa May when she was deciding whether or not to call the 2017 general election. Here's what he had to say about the current government strategy.
So I think what Number 10 have decided is that they've realised that the parliamentary arithmetic is stacked against them and that the only choice for them here is a general election. So it appears that now Number 10 and Boris Johnson are set on that election, and it's a big gamble. So I was in Number 10 when Theresa May decided to go to the people in 2017. That was described as a gamble. This is the biggest gamble of them all. He's betting the house on getting a majority big enough to get his plan to get no deal through Parliament, or to have a big enough majority to try and tell Brussels we've got a mandate here for a new deal. It's very, very high risk.
And we've been here before where a Prime Minister comes in who hasn't faced a general election. It's a handover. Gordon Brown bottled it famously, but Theresa May ran, and it did them both detriment. Gordon Brown was kind of mocked for not running, and then for Theresa May, she lost her majority. Is there, though, any option in this case when he only has a majority of one because it's been so eroded? Could he have done anything else but call this a possible general election?
So I think there are a couple of options potentially, depending on how he could have ran. So, for example, he didn't need to say October 31st, do or die, as he did. But because he has, it does leave them very little room for negotiation. So it certainly seems that they're locked into this election. The question is, can they pull it off? And the kind of voters they're trying to win are long-time Labour voters in working-class areas who, we tried to crack. Theresa May tried to crack in 2017 and wasn't able to. So you're quite right. Boris hasn't been tested in a national election. This is the do-or-die moment for him, as well as the Brexit. We did quite a lot of analysis when I was at Number 10, and our analysis showed that this was the most volatile the electorate's ever been in the UK. So definitely a big risk in that respect. You're quite right. Boris Johnson is a good campaigner. He did win London. The problem is we are now in a world where it's not just Boris Johnson going up to the British public. It's the premise of a no-deal Brexit. And yes, that will appeal to some people in the North Midlands, other working-class voters, Leave voters, but it will also put off quite a lot of those younger, more Remain-voting, middle-class voters that any party, not just the Conservatives, that any party needs to win a majority in the United Kingdom.
Well, as is now normal in British politics, a lot of scenarios at play here in Westminster. We could be in a general election. There could be moves to block that too. Boris Johnson, it seems, wants one, possible date of October the 14th. He thinks that if he gets a big stonking majority, his threat of no deal will be heard properly in Brussels at that October 17th council meeting. But it seems as though opposition parties starting to twig that getting into an election now, as much as they all want it to try and get some power, might not be the best deal, especially as we heard there with that split electorate. It really is going to be an unpredictable few weeks here in Westminster.
Correspondent Vincent McAviney. Jeffrey, I'll start with you. You were shaking your head when Philippe was being critical of what Boris Johnson is doing, and you're generally supportive of what Boris is saying.
I'm totally supportive of what he's saying.
But isn't he playing a dangerous game, a dangerous gamble?
Look, the tactic of the European Union all along has been to try and delay this business for as long as possible because they think there's going to be some sort of change of government in the United Kingdom and that they would come in then and wish to remain and all the rest of it. And these people now who are creating trouble at Westminster for the government are playing exactly into their hands. So Boris has said very firmly, we're leaving on the 31st because we've got to bring an end to this.
So do you think it's a brilliant strategy,
those people
then?
that really want to leave with a deal, the best thing they can do is get behind the Prime Minister because he wants a deal as well. He wants a deal.
This is ludicrous.
It's not ludicrous. This is exactly
what does he want?
Let me just say what I think. I mean, he claims that he wants a deal. And he starts by saying, well, get me rid of this backstop.
Exactly.
And do you think that he's coming with the slightest alternative to that? Absolutely not. Basically, what Boris Johnson is saying is, you, European Union, what I'm asking you is very simple. We don't want a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. I commit not to control the goods and services and people who cross that border. And so just do the same and we'll be fine. We will transform the United Kingdom into a place of social dumping, environmental dumping, taxation dumping. And of course, then the trade flows will be from the UK to the European Union. And he's just asking us not to control. Would he stop controlling people coming to Dover? Of course not. So he basically wants to open a massive gap into the single market, basically committing suicide to the single market.
It is relatively small, that trade, but it is vitally important.
No, but then
it is vitally important to the Irish Republic.
And it will become the smuggling place of Europe.
Let's look at two things got revealed today. First of all, we heard from Boris Johnson yesterday saying he thought that real progress had been made in negotiations to get a deal. The EU today said, yes, they've made progress in terms of they're meeting more, but nothing on substance at all. And second of all, we heard from reports in the British media, from the Daily Telegraph, who Boris Johnson used to work for and a big fan of his, their Europe edit here suggesting that Dominic Cummings, who's chief of staff, was saying that these negotiations are a sham and that they are simply trying to count down the clock in the hope that Brussels will blink at the last minute. And all I would say is, and I would say this, the British position, how logical is it? Because Boris Johnson, on one hand, is saying that, you know what, a no-deal Brexit is manageable. We can deal with it. It's not that big a deal. And on the second hand, that's what he's saying to people in Britain. And then on the second hand, he's trying to frighten the EU with a no-deal Brexit. And you can't have a reaction.
Can I just say, this morning I met representatives of the European gas industry. And one of the things they talked about was the gas trade between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland. They said there would be absolutely no problems after Brexit. There are all sorts of ways in which this will be overcome without difficulty.
I want to talk about Boris Johnson's immediate next steps, though, because if he were forced to come back to Brussels and, you know, if legislation were passed that he had to actually ask for an extension, is he prepared to just ignore that legislation, as everyone's been trying to find out and ask? Do you think he could, he should, he would?
We've got to take this a step at a time, because as soon as you start conceding points like that, you've already given up the argument.
Oh, come on, that is not what the Prime Minister obeying the law of the land is not conceding a point, isn't it? That surely is a rock solid bit for a democracy, that when a parliament passes a law, the government obeys it.
It is the government that introduces laws.
So they have the right to
Parliament. And what has happened now is, under this Speaker of the House of Commons, they've thrown convention aside. We already saw how that was thrown aside earlier in the year when they found ways of ruining Theresa May's deals. And now they're trying to do the same again. And the only agenda at work, really, here, among those people, they want to get Corbyn into a Labour government. They want all these options closed down so that we end up with a Corbyn government in Britain.
Can I just say something, Mr. Van Orden? In democracies, the government gets its legitimacy from the parliament, not the other way around.
Exactly.
So what you're saying is that we are basically... No. The parliament gets it from the people and the government from the parliament. That's how it works.
Well, our government is from the parliament.
Is that this damn parliament is not doing the government's will. Sorry, we've had enough of this.
So having said this, I would like your thoughts on this, because you said something strong when Theresa May was still Prime Minister. You said she's devoid of the basic human skills needed for a political leader. What do you think about Boris Johnson? Sure, but Boris Johnson now, how is he doing as a leader?
Well, to me, he lacks every credibility. I mean, he's been doing his utmost the past few years to destroy whatever trust people might have in him. I mean, he's been saying black and white. He's been basically deciding his position on the referendum by tossing a coin. Well, basically for political opportunistic reasons.
So he changes, and you don't...
So I have zero trust in the guy.
I'm always interested when foreigners are talking about our domestic politics in this way. I cover a large chunk of the east of England. When I'm travelling around and I talk to people, not necessarily normal Tory voters, and I say to them, what do you think of Boris? They said, marvellous. Isn't it nice to feel a sense of
Well, just
optimism.
just as we see the debate happening here in the studio, I mean, the same thing is happening on social media. It's a bitter Brexit division continuing with both Remainers and Brexiteers now claiming to be fighting to save British democracy. So has there been a coup? And if so, by whom? Alex in the Cube has this story. So Alex, bring it to us.
Well, Tessa, when it comes to the row over the future of British democracy, let's rewind to yesterday when Boris Johnson was making that address outside Number 10. Have a listen in to what you can hear in the background.
I wanted to improve your hospital and reduce waiting times at your GP. And so we are doing 20 new hospital upgrades in addition to the 34 billion more going into the NHS.
Chants of stop the coup, threatening to drown out the Prime Minister. And stop the coup, let's not forget, that has been the rallying cry across social media for people who see Boris Johnson as illegitimate and by extension his Brexit plans too. Look at this. This is the digital map they are using on social media to coordinate across the United Kingdom demonstrations throughout September. They are calling Boris Johnson's manoeuvrings a coup. Why? Well, it goes back to that decision by Boris Johnson to announce Parliament will be prorogued, that is, suspended. Now, of course, while there's a lot of debate about why the Prime Minister did it, for his critics, it was an attempt, in their view, to limit the amount of time, to squeeze down the time opposition MPs would have to debate and stop the coup protests. Well, here's a group from Yorkshire marching through London yesterday. Let's go to Liverpool. Images from there. People using this hashtag to get on the streets. They see the Prime Minister as attacking democracy. But hang on a minute, let's rewind. The European elections. Remember the big European election campaign fought by the Brexit Party over the same point about British democracy being betrayed. Nigel Farage at the time saying, democracy has been betrayed. We must fight for it. So here you have the rather absurd situation where the Brexiteers see themselves as defending a referendum result against an undemocratic parliament. At the very same time, the Remainers are seeing themselves defending a parliament against what they see as a coup by Brexiteers. Why does this matter? Well, this gives you a sense about the dialogue, the state of British politics at a time when the clock is ticking down to Brexit. There has already been an extension and there is no plan to deal with things. So how have ordinary people been responding? That's a lot of what the activists and the politicians have said. Well, one of those who got in touch with us was Sue. She is sympathetic to the Prime Minister, saying that it's Parliament putting a ball and chain around his ankle and that he's doing everything he can to show he's standing up for the people against what she sees, if you like, not using the word directly, but sees an attempt as a coup by Parliament to get in the way of Brexit. But so many other people, like Anne, like those people I showed you there, marching on the streets because they feel they are the ones defending democracy. This goes to show that even after Brexit date may pass, these kind of divisions, well, they're going to hang around in Britain for potentially a political generation.
All right, thank you for that, Alex. I mean, Darren, just to paint the picture of just how unprecedented this is in British democracy, if you can say, or society.
I mean, it really is, and every single day we seem to break a convention.
And we don't know the answer.
And Britain is a country that essentially lives on convention because it hasn't got a codified written constitution. And that gets chipped away. And it must be said that from both sides, I think their trust in democracy is being chipped away. Yeah. All I would add is, Boris Johnson is a popular figure. And if there is a general election in the UK, he will be a far more effective campaigner, a far more formidable campaigner than Theresa May was. And no doubt that I think Jeremy Corbyn's star has somewhat fallen. That is not to say, as actually we heard from London, that this is still a massive gamble for him, because while he will win some voters around, he risks alienating others, not least of all, and it's not just a strain on how divided, people in Britain are, but how much the United Kingdom is. And all I would say is an election campaign, an election result is only likely to show kind of increased support for Remain in Scotland and Northern Ireland versus England or Wales, and that will again tear at the seams of the country.
Election, the question of a general election, how likely is that?
We shall see what happens today.
So you don't have
Boris has said very clearly he does not want to have a general election.
It's not just
it might be forced upon him. And by the way, I must just say, whenever we're getting these little reports on our screens, we see all these people waving these EU flags. It gives a totally wrong impression. I don't know any people in all of my part of England who want to wander around waving EU flags.
You don't think that's genuine?
I think it's a genuine little group of people, but they are not representative at all. I don't know people that want to be waving EU flags.
I think the country is divided.
It's not divided in that way.
Even
people that voted Remain in the referendum, many of them, perhaps most of them, did it because it was a purely pragmatic calculation, not through any affection for the European Union.
Philippe, respond to what Jeff is saying.
What I don't like, Mr. Van Orden, in the way you present things, it's really us, the United Kingdom, against them, the European Union. It's like the United Kingdom is indeed united, and out of loyalty, everyone in Parliament, every citizen should be supportive of the government because basically it's the good against the evil. Sorry, the United Kingdom is divided. Yes, it's true. A big number of British citizens want to leave the European Union. That's fact. But an almost equally big number of UK citizens want to remain in the European Union.
Not through any love of the European Union. That's my point.
That's again interpretation.
Yes.
Facts is that the country is almost evenly divided.
Do we agree with that
you may
is
say
divided?
no, but that's the reality. That's the reality. And the way Prime Minister behaves and the way basically your speech is polarizing even more. And I think that you will need to build bridges someday.
Divided?
Someday,
yes or
all
no?
I will add is that whatever happens, Brexit will not end on October 31st.
Okay, let's check in with Darren on that. That's quite a prediction,
even if it leaves with no
Darren.
deal, Brexit's going to carry on for years to come.
The impact, at least. Okay, coming up on Raw Politics, will a no-deal Brexit require natural disaster funding from Brussels? Our Brexit coverage continues after the break. Plus, we have a lot more for you. Patriotic or nationalistic? Mandatory flags in classrooms spark a debate in France. Do stay with us for that. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, it's less than 60 days until Brexit, and the EU is stepping up its preparedness as they're considering a no-deal scenario as the default option. Now, talks continue between the two parties, but just how well are they actually going? So let's take a look at what the two sides are saying.
And we're making good progress on the Brexit negotiations. And the reason for that is we've got this targeted ask, removing the undemocratic backstop, and we've been crystal clear with our EU partners that we're coming out at the end of October.
We have progress on process because, as you see, there are talks now which previously you had no contacts anymore before the G7 at technical level. Now we do have an intensified way of channeling and exchanging information. Whether there is progress on substance, I will not be able to judge this now and here.
Well, MEPs like us, they're back in Brussels this week. So I went out to ask them about the current state of negotiations and the prospect of a Brexit extension. This is what they said. Should the EU be compromising now to avoid a no-deal Brexit?
The EU had already compromised, and the ball is in the field of London's players.
We will have to watch politics in the House of Commons these days to see what emerges, but I'm afraid the reality of no-deal Brexit looks like more than it had been at any other time in the past.
I don't think we should compromise. We have been asked to do that and to compromise for how long the negotiations have taken place. So I think we've gone as far as we can go.
We have one single market. If we come to a hard Brexit, it's a disaster.
I think this is not a problem of EU. I mean, we are not a troublemaker in the story. So that's why we should be looking for the best outcome and I would say constructive negotiations, but it should be from both sides.
If they ask for an extension, should the EU say yes to another one?
Yeah, I think every day the UK stays in the EU is a good day.
You mean an extension in time? Yet another one? I guess we could do that, but what would be, I mean, it's been going on for 3 years now.
I think extension is not the biggest problem in this regard. I would be in favor.
You know that we cannot extend without any condition. Let's go back to the British people and ask them where they would like to go. That could be a reason.
These are difficult questions because if we keep rolling on extension after extension, we could be here in 10 years' time answering these same questions.
And joining me now in the studio, we have Marian Jean Marinescu, a Romanian MEP and Vice Chair of the European People's Party. We also have Svenja Hahn, a German MEP from the Renew Group, and Belinda de Lucy, a Brexit Party MEP from the UK. All right, just a quick round from all of you. The same, similar question, no deal scenario. Is that really the default option? Is that the feeling that everyone has? No deal, that's it?
I think we're seeing democracy eroding right in front of our eyes, and I believe it's a joke of history that Boris Johnson, who always falsely accused the EU institution of being undemocratic, unelected, is now in a position where he was not elected by the people and tries to strip away the parliament from its rights, representing democracy.
Is this the most likely scenario now? No deal?
As Johnson says, yes. From the EU side, I don't think so, because we are trying to convince the...
So you don't think so, actually?
We shall see.
Okay.
You have to ask Mr. Johnson. That's the...
And from the Brexit party, surely
answer.
you're like...
The only reason we are in this position is because of the unwillingness and incompetence of our political class, that we're even facing a no deal. Had we had MPs that honoured their manifestos from the beginning and got behind a democratic vote, we wouldn't have this chaos, we wouldn't necessarily have Boris, we wouldn't even have the Brexit party. So it's down to the failures of the political class that we are in this position now.
Well look, I think, as Mairead was saying there, that this has never been more real as it is now. Thereby, you have the EU preparing for this scenario, in fact, preparing to categorize this as a major disaster. I mean, that's quite a statement to do this. And obviously, the reason is also for funding.
But obviously, we need to prepare for the worst case, which would be a no deal for both sides. But we need to make sure what we need is clarity. And clarity we would get from a second referendum with a clear option, this deal, no deal, or stay. That would bring clarity to everyone, the UK and the EU. And for that, I believe a lot of my colleagues would be willing to give an extension of the deadline if there's a referendum.
Okay, if we go to... Okay, you want to respond to that,
I'm sorry, you talk about certainty. Delay is causing the biggest uncertainty. Businesses are in chaos at the moment because they don't know where they're going. If they knew we were leaving on a no deal, at least they could plan for it. This delay is an attempt to stop Brexit. It is not an attempt to get a bit better deal. It's absolutely motivated by Remainers in our parliament trying to stop Brexit.
How can you
and a second referendum isn't democratic. How can you force a second referendum on the people without implementing the decision of the first one?
Go ahead,
Mr. The best solution right now is to put in place the agreement that already was done. This is the best solution for both parties. And if there is no deal, Brexit will be very bad for UK. EU is
but
prepared
also for the EU,
to face...
So you think the EU is prepared?
EU, we prepared a lot in the last term. We even voted different measures to be taken in case of a no-deal Brexit, because EU is thinking to the citizens, not to the political class. That I agree with you. I think that you have to improve your political class.
The reason why I brought up the category.
Brexit, everybody should think to the citizens, not to the government or to the positions in the government. So EU is thinking and
so I want to ask about this budget.
The agreement for the citizens, both parties.
I want to ask about this preparedness because, you know, we've seen that there are proposals to categorize this as a major disaster. The reason for that, that we're talking about this is because that would give people who need it, or nations who need it, access to certain funds. You've been working closely with that budget as well. Are we expecting to hear that from the European Commission?
About budget?
Yeah, about opening up a fund for people who need it, those who will be impacted by Brexit.
No, to be honest, I didn't hear about it. The budget is prepared also for a case of no deal. 2019 is, I don't think that it will be a problem. 2020, it will be a problem, but EU is prepared to face this.
Okay, so Svenja, is the EU prepared? Is the EU ready for this? And do you think it's going to really hurt?
I completely disagree with Belinda. There's no certainty from a no deal. The only certainty is it will be chaos. You can take measurements like customs union measurement preparedness, but we do not know what we were expecting in a no-deal Brexit. I'm afraid it will be chaos, though there are measurements by the EU, and I do believe we need to stop a no-deal situation.
And don't forget that the main reason for no deal is the border with Ireland, and this I don't understand at all.
Okay.
Yeah, to put the
That's
island
point,
in this
indeed,
situation
of this,
is not the right way to do it.
But unfortunately, for us, certainly for many people in the UK, we feel that the Irish border has been used by the EU as a tactic in negotiations to keep us as members of the customs.
But it's the Irish as well who were reacting to that.
But you say keep peace, it breaches the Belfast Agreement. The Withdrawal Act creates a border between Northern Ireland and the UK, but you don't seem to mind about that.
All right, this discussion is definitely going to continue, but we'll have to leave it there. We've run out of time.
No one's putting up a border.
No, all right. Okay, so let's move on, because as the UK prepares to take down its EU flags, France is doing the exact opposite. Let's take a look. Sharpen your pencils. It's back to school for Europe's children. And in France, a new addition to the country's classrooms. They're all now required to fly the French and EU flags, as well as display the words to the national anthem. A patriotic push by President Emmanuel Macron? Well, not quite. Flying the French flag in classrooms was an idea first put forward by Les Républicains, the centre-right party, after a tussle with ministers, a compromise. The government adopted the proposal, though insisted on also highlighting France's EU membership and its famous Marseillaise. But it's been branded a drift towards nationalism by the left-wing France Insoumise party. The debate continues in France's classrooms and beyond. All right, as a symbol of the state, does this actually achieve anything, or is it nationalistic, as some of the critics are saying? Svenja?
Well, as a German, we have a difficult history when it comes to showing symbols of nationality. So we usually do it at soccer tournaments. But I think the most important point is here that they put the French flag on the same and equal terms with the EU flag. So it's a commitment to their country, but a clear commitment to the EU as well.
We will still want really friendly, healthy relationships with the EU. We just think that the anthem, the army, the sort of empire direction that it's going in is actually quite damaging and risks peace in Europe. I think you need to get rid of flags and anthems and armies in the EU and respect national sovereignty and national flags in a healthy, patriotic way.
So very quick thought from you.
I don't see any problem in this. We are members of the EU, but in the same time we have to keep our traditions, our culture, our education, national. This is not national.
Do flags really foster love of country?
Yes,
though?
This is not an extreme political act. It's a normal act.
Okay, we have a lot more coming up on the program. The moment of truth for an unlikely coalition in Italy. Plus, we may not have been on air, but August provided no shortage of gaffes, spats, and really awkward moments. The Raw Moment coming up, the summer edition. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Now, there is another political turmoil brewing on the continent. In Italy, members of the anti-establishment Five-Star Party are deciding the fate of a potential new government. Well, the party has brokered a coalition deal with the country's moderate Democratic Party in order to try and stay in power after the previous government with Matteo Salvini's far-right League Party collapsed. Now, if Five-Star Party members reject the pact, the country could face early snap elections. Now, last night, Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte, he urged members to back the deal. Now, let's take a listen.
Abbiamo davanti una sfida non da poco e capisco bene le vostre perplessità, ma questa è un'occasione unica per dimostrare che si può riformare davvero incisivamente questo Paese e fare cose straordinarie se il vero e autentico obiettivo che si persegue è il bene degli italiani.
All right, and joining us here in the studio to talk about Italy is Eleonora Evi, a five-star MEP from Italy. We also have Rosa Balfour, a senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund think tank, and back with us, the co-chair of the Greens EFA group, MEP Philippe Lambert. Okay, I'll start with you, of course, as you know, from the Five-Star movement. Now, a lot of people watching what's happening in Italy say, well, the Five-Star partnering with the Democratic Party, it's a complete betrayal of everything you stand for. This is the party that some of your party members actually see as the symbol of a corrupt establishment. So is it a betrayal, and why is the Five-Star even considering this?
Well, I guess that our previous partner wasn't really the best guy in the class. I mean, Lega and Salvini, with them, it has been a critical relationship, let's say. So I would say that since we are a post-ideological movement and political force, and we have already set up a government that has been working for the last 14 months and has been also delivering on a number of issues. I quote just for an example the minimum income, for example, the basic income for Italian citizens. I really believe we should go on and try to see if there are other political forces, and in this case, the Democrat Party is willing to work with us. And I hope is going to be a new government set on these principles. So, but it seems just keeping Matteo Salvini out of government is one of the main motivations of this coalition. I mean, is that really enough? It's not the main reason, of course. I mean, we had elections 1.5 years ago, and the picture of the parliament is already set dead at that time. And we are the political force with the majority of seats in the parliament. We have the responsibility and the need to see if there are other political forces with which we can collaborate and do. Philippe, for this, if this does happen in Italy, is it a positive turn for the EU? It means an easier time working with the coalition government in Italy?
Well, you know, whenever the far right is in government, I think that we are in the danger zone. And, you know, we are working quite well with the 5 stars in the European Parliament. We have a lot in common. We have our differences as well. But, you know, I remember discussions with some of your colleagues, Fabio Massimo Castaldo, for instance, before. The government, the Lega Cinque Stelle, well, the Cinque Stelle Lega government was formed, and he said, no, don't worry, it won't happen. And to me, it was a heartbreaker to see that happening. I know that at that time, Matteo Renzi, the same guy who turned his coat and now said, I embrace Cinque Stelle, was dead against an alliance between Cinque Stelle and PD. And I think at that time it would have been the best alliance for Italy after the elections. Now it happens 18 months later, better late than never. But I could not understand that Cinque Stelle would simply be in bed with not just a far-rightist guy, Salvini, but one of the worst
basically this makes more sense to you.
Absolutely.
Okay, before I go to you, Rosa, very quickly, Eleonora, so what do you tell to your voters who voted for 5-star because you're an anti-establishment party and now, well, maybe not anymore? What do you say to them?
We won't betray our values and our principles and our fights that has been connotate our history and our birth 10 years ago. We just have to take the responsibility to work for the welfare of Italians.
Okay, Rosa, let's put this in context. What's happening in Italy?
Well, I think this crisis, which was long foretold, is symptomatic of the volatility of the political party system in Italy, which also means that if this new government were formed, it will be structurally weak and could fall perhaps in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. We'll have to see.
Which Salvini is probably banking on.
Well, that's probably Salvini's strategy. Let's not forget that he actually manufactured the crisis in the first place. Yeah. So there probably is some game playing going on there. But the volatility of the political party system is a consequence of the inability of Italy to reform itself. And this has been protracted for decades. And this is the big gamble that the next government should undertake. What I think is interesting from a European perspective is that this is actually a real game changer for the EU. Because Italy, if this government were to be approved, Italy will actually be sending to Brussels a pro-European competent commissioner who will be participating in big decisions, including on the next financial framework, which needs to be decided by the end of 2020. And by participating in those decisions, which the previous government was not really doing, it was blocking a lot, by participating, Italy actually has an opportunity to shape EU policy in a way which perhaps meets some of the recurrent frustrations of the electorate.
Yeah, that's why I was asking whether it will be actually easier for the European Union to be working with Italy at this point. But, you know.
But don't take Italy for granted. I think that the confrontational approach taken by the Cinque Stelle Lega government before, for instance, on topics like the architecture of the euro, was unlikely to ever succeed. If now the new Italian government engages into alliance building within the Eurozone, to change the discussion about the euro and to try to forge a coalition to bring about a reform of the euro, that promises much more. And I think that Italy has a key role to play there. It's the third biggest economy of the eurozone. It has to engage positively because where we agree is that the current architecture of the euro is not beneficial to Italy. That's fact. That's fact. And so it has been immensely beneficial to Germany. We need to rebalance the euro, but we need not a consensual, but a constructive approach to that. And you know, the kind of
I guess a lot more compromise.
Chest-thumping approach of Salvini didn't help.
Okay, very quickly, Eleonora. Okay.
Remember that even in the past, we had not only Salvini in the government, and we already and we already had an approach very collaborative, especially, for example, on the environment. We have been one of the countries
with the Democratic
supporting the transition on the reduction of the emission, for example, in the mobility sector, for example.
So if you do disagree with something with the Democratic Party, do we see more compromise from the Five-Star Movement? Just to keep the government working?
Well, absolutely. We have been always saying that we wanted to work on a single topics and we try to find solutions together. This is the approach, very post-ideological, as I said, and I hope this new collaboration will last.
We'll see what your party members actually...
government stable for the future.
We'll see what your party members actually have to say to that today. All right, coming up, as the Brexit chaos continues, do you think the UK needs an election? So your call is coming up right after the program, and we want to hear from you. You can call us at 00800 3333 7002. As always, use the hashtag #RawPolitics on Twitter and all of social media. And you can also look for us on Skype. So our lines are opening soon.
Democracy is alive and kicking.
Proof of a democracy is if you can vote out those who make your rules.
Will Brexit be a blip in the course of history, or a fracture?
I'm angry, and other people are angry, and we want to leave Europe.
Welcome back to the program. Now, those were the highlights from last season's Your Call, and we will be kicking off another new season tonight. So Your Call is back at our usual time of 7 p.m. Central European Time, 6 p.m. if you're in the UK. And we will be joined back by Geoffrey Van Orden, British MEP from the Conservative Party. And still with us, Rosa Balfour, Senior Fellow from the German Marshall Fund. And of course, Darren is hosting tonight. So Darren, what are we talking about?
We've got an eclectic mix of topics actually tonight. We're talking about whether halal meat should be banned in most parts of Belgium. We're talking about tourism, how irritated you potentially are by all those hordes of tourists coming to your city or town.
Fresh from our summer break.
But also talking about Brexit. Let's have a look.
I don't want an election. You don't want an election.
So he says. But the UK Prime Minister is locked in a historic power struggle with Parliament and now is widely expected to call for a general election before Brexit. So we want to know, does the UK need an election? A crackdown in Belgium, which is aiming to ban halal and kosher slaughter, it would mean butchers could no longer kill animals without prior stunning. Critics say it's a sign of growing anti-immigration sentiment. So we're asking, is Belgium right to ban halal and kosher slaughter? And it's been a summer of heated debate over tourism, with clampdowns hitting the headlines. Rome banning tourists from sitting on the famous Spanish Steps, Venice prohibiting picnics on an iconic bridge, and Paris planning to ban tourist buses from the city centre. So what do you think? Have you had enough of tourists? Have your say. Does the UK need an election? Is Belgium right to ban halal and kosher slaughter? And have you had enough of tourists? This is Your Call. And you know what to do? Pick up the phone. It's all about you. The number you haven't forgotten over the summer, have you? 00800 333 702. You can email us, rawpol@euronews.com. You can also join in via Skype, or indeed, if you're on Facebook or Twitter, use the hashtag #RawPolitics.
Indeed. All right, Geoffrey, you'll be on the programme tonight. What do you want to hear from people tonight?
Well, I'd like to hear that they're supportive of our Prime Minister and what he's trying to do. Prime Minister wants to get a deal. he's being stymied by other politicians and parties at Westminster at the moment. We should all get behind the Prime Minister, send the right message to Brussels.
I wonder if we will be hearing that. Rosa, do you think opinion is, where do you think opinion lies on this?
Well, at the moment, with the prorogation of Parliament, public opinion is up in arms in the UK, and I think the polls will show that there's a lot of confusion on this. I think Boris Johnson's strategy is not that clear, actually. I think it's not certain whether what he's aiming for is a no deal or what he's aiming for is actually to force Brussels to change the withdrawal agreement through these tactics, which are, to frighten Brussels that if...
Wonder how successful it'll be, and we're asking
we have to
as
remember
well.
These MPs were elected a year after the referendum. So in some ways, they're more legitimate than the referendum.
Yes, but not to be expressing views and behaving in the way that they are at the moment.
And also, we're asking tonight if the UK needs an election. It's
indeed.
I wonder
You look at it now.
will have to say.
Boris Johnson essentially has lost his majority with a defection this afternoon to the Liberal Democrats. So essentially, he has got no majority
Is it more likely
to govern. Many would argue that actually, given the fact that the governing party doesn't have a majority, an election may be the way through it. The big question is, if there was an election, would we get a different result? We may well end up with a same-hung parliament and in the same position that we're currently in.
So what do you think? You join in on this conversation. Rosa, do you want to say something?
Well, I think the debate right now is actually on whether no-deal Brexit is what the Brits want. And it's not clear through the referendum result that this was the desire. In fact, the referendum result didn't say anything of the kind of exit from the EU, and therefore the discussion, there are other options. There's soft Brexit, there's hard Brexit, there's the withdrawal agreement negotiated by Theresa May.
Scrambled egg Brexit.
No, there you
There are all
go.
sorts of options.
Jeffrey's just shaking his head. He's like,
Yeah,
no.
well, exactly. I mean, the only people that want no-deal Brexit are Nigel Farage and his gang. Right? As far as others are concerned.
That's not true.
It is true.
There are dozens of Conservative MPs who'd love to see a no-deal Brexit.
Well, a small minority, maybe. But I would say the government is very clear. They want to get a deal done, but they don't want that deal that we had
But the move of the backbench MPs today is to say, if there is no new deal by the 19th of October, we want to force government
to ask for an extension. That's
actually
what
it's about.
We want you to join this conversation.
Them,
and Jeffrey, you'll be sticking around, right? So we want you to join this conversation, this debate, if you agree with them or not. All right, but before we go, we have time for tonight's Raw Moment and a selection of some of our favorites, which you may have missed over the summer. There were a lot. Take a look.
Well, Greenland, I don't know, it got released somehow. It's just something we talked about. Denmark essentially owns it.
I mean, we thought summer was going to be quiet, but clearly not.
No, definitely not.
August is always busy. There's always a crisis.
There's always the silly season. I do love that picture of Melania Trump, though, and Justin Trudeau. With
there are so many awkward kisses at the G7.
Very, very good. Very good.
Indeed, it's been a busy summer for politics. As Jeffrey was saying, usually August is busy. All right, we would love to hear your views. Remember, stick around for your call right after this program, so you can use the hashtag #RawPolitics, and you can call in, join Darren later in that program. All right, thank you so much for joining us tonight, our first show of the second season. Have a good evening.